My name is Virginia Jones, and today we'll be making cedar basket earrings. You'll need a pair of scissors, big eye needle, raffia, 2 earring hooks, a pair of jewelry pliers, your cedar soaked in warm water for about 10 to 15 minutes. You'll start with 6 pieces of cedar. And you're going to plait a 3x3 bottom for your basket by doing over-under weave, just a checkerboard style. Once you have the bottom, you're going to get a piece of raffia and do 2 rows of twining. Remember, on the first row we double twist on each corner. That's our first row. Now we'll twine the second row. Now that we have our 2 rows, we're going to bring our raffia to the back side of the basket and tie a double knot. You can tuck this raffia if you don't like to tie knots. Because it's such a small project, I just do a knot because not that many people are going to see. You're going to trim your raffia. Now is when I even up each of the sides of cedar, and you do that by measuring straight across, and you're trying to get them a similar height. You want to check both sides. If you don't even up your cedar, your basket's only going to be as tall as your shortest piece. Now we're going to crease our edges. We crease the edges so that it makes it easier for the basket to stand up. Now we're going to get our cedar add-in and a piece of raffia. We're going to put the cedar add-in in by starting with under, over, under. And we're going to do some twining with our raffia to hold that piece in place. So fold your raffia in half, loop goes over your first spoke, and then you start your twining. Once I do those 3 spokes, I'm going to put the cedar spoke in along the next side and twine the next side of my basket. Now that we've made it all the way around, I'm just going to tuck this cedar add-in behind the first spoke where I started. And I'm going to do a second row of twining. Now that I've made it 2 rows, I'm going to bring the raffia to the inside. I'm going to double knot it and trim my raffia. And I'm going to trim the cedar spoke. And then I'm going to start my next cedar add-in, and I want to make sure that I start it in a different place. I'm going to take my raffia, fold it in half, and I'm going to start my 2 rows of twining. Once you've made it 2 rows around, bring your raffia inside the basket and double knot. I'm going to trim the raffia. And trim this cedar spoke. Now you'll take your next piece of cedar and raffia and you'll start your edging. So you start edging by putting this cedar spoke behind at least 2 spokes. And then you're going to put the raffia in. So your raffia starts on this side of the spoke, and then your cedar add-ins coming out on the other side. So your first step is to wrap around and down. You're going to fold and bring a new cedar spoke to the front. Now I'm going to need to trim this piece of cedar because it's too long. I'm going to leave it the length of 2 spokes, and I'm going to trim it. To measure, if you wanted to trim all of these spokes first, you would measure 2 spokes over and trim. And then you could cut them all the same height. Some people like to trim as they go, and some like to trim everything before they start edging. Wrap around and down, fold, new spoke to the front. Wrap, fold, new spoke to the front. I'm going to trim the cedar, this time the length of 1 fold. And I'm going to cut it a little bit at an angle. Then I'm going to put it in between the beginning of that edger spoke and that first fold. Then I'm going to use my needle and I'm going to put a couple of stitches with this raffia. So I'm going to go up in between the fold and around the inside, and I'm going to bring my needle through the gap just above my yellow raffia. And that's one stitch. Usually you want to do at least 2 stitches. And I'm going to bring it back up and trim. And I'm going to tuck this first piece of raffia if your needle's too long, you can put your needle in place and then thread it with the raffia like this. And then I'm going to trim. Now we're going to create a handle. To make the handle of the basket, we're going to use raffia. You can use string or any other type of material that you have. We're going to start with a loose single knot, and we're going to leave a little bit of a tail. For this earring, I'm just going to do a braid, and it's going to be kind of a fine braid. You can make this braid however thick you want it to be. Just make sure that you have a needle big enough to tuck. When you think you have a long enough braid, you're going to measure it to your basket. And I always look at my basket and see which side of the basket I want to be the front. And you're going to measure and see if that's the length you want. If that's the length you want, you're going to take your needle if your raffia is long, you can trim it, but I would leave some length to it so that you can tie a double knot. So you're going to thread the raffia through the basket. And you want to go just under the edging. And take your needle off. And now you're going to take the raffia and tie a double knot. And you want that knot to end up somewhat on the inside of your basket, on the inside edge. And you want to tie that knot pretty tight so that way you can trim the raffia close to the knot. Now we're going to untie that loose knot that we started with. I'm going to trim this raffia so I can get it through my needle. Thread all the raffia onto your needle. Again, you're going to go right above your last row of raffia and right below your edging. Take your needle off, and you're going to want to look at the sizing of your braid when you're tying your double knot. And again, you're trying to get that knot kind of on the inside of your basket as best you can. And you're going to trim your raffia. And now you'll need your jewelry pliers and your earring hook, and you're just going to open the loop on the bottom of your hook. I want this side to be my front, so I'm going to look at which way I'm putting that hook on. I'm going to close that loop. And now that you have your loop closed, your earring is finished. Now that you're finished with your first cedar basket earring, you just make your second earring so that you have a matching pair.